Welcome to the Leader's Pause. I'm your host, Hal Runkle, and as always, we start with a question. So, this is a personal one for me today, but if your kids were launching out into the world, what messages would you want to give them? What are the key things you would want them to remember as they're going out on their own and they don't have you within immediate earshot, even in today's technology? That is what we're going to discuss because it also happens to be the best advice I know of for living a fantastic life as an adult and as a leader. So hang on, stay with me, and we'll address all those when we get back. Welcome to the Leader's Pause.
Welcome to the Leader's Pause, where leaders like you tune in to find calm, get clear, and level up. Tune in with best-selling author, speaker, and coach Hal Runkle as he helps you take back your time, your energy, and your decision-making power. All you have to do is learn to press your own pause button first. So, take a break, take a breath, take a knee, and learn to access your greatest human superpower, the ability to pause, think, and decide for yourself. It's time to find calm, get clear, and level up. The Leader's Pause starts now.
Welcome to the show. Again, my name is Hal Runkle, and I am very, very blessed and lucky to be an executive leadership coach, and I get to work with clients all over the world, and I also get to do this little show, which is fun. And tomorrow, I have it's a special day. My son is heading to a foreign country for a little while. Now, this is not something new. He's actually lived abroad before. He did that during college. Now he's a young man, 25 years old, and he's heading off to Mexico to work as a model. He's a model and an actor and a filmmaker, and he's going to do some modeling stuff for a little while. So it's got me thinking about those times when he began to launch from me early on, and we've experienced many of those. He's gone off to college. He's lived on his own. He's lived in a different state. Like I said, he did a semester in Europe, but now he's doing a semester, no, doing a while in Mexico. And it's just got me thinking about the messages I've wanted to send to him, which are also the messages that I've actually wanted to send to myself. Because what I wanted to do, and it actually started not with him, but with his sister. His sister's older. She's 27 now, but when she was about 16, I started thinking about her going off to college. And I started thinking about what messages would I like her to consider as she was heading out into this new, larger womb, if you will. I had my very first therapist I ever saw was this wise country doctor guy, and got to travel out in the boonies to see him. And one of his great metaphors was he said, all of life is moving from one womb to another. You're in your mother's womb, literally, and it's exactly where you're supposed to be. You are safe, you are warm, you are comfortable, you are fed, you are cared for, you're protected. But you're also growing, which means you can't stay there forever. And his understanding was that's all of life. Is you'll get into a place, you'll adjust to that place. It's the perfect place for you to be safe and comfortable, but you are growing. And so you're going to have to leave that place. And so all of life was moving from one womb to another. And the transition process, the birthing process, if you will, is always traumatic, terrifying, scary for everybody involved, dangerous even if not done well. And when, think about it, when baby comes out, it's screaming its head off, it's breathing oxygen, everything in it wants to climb right back in. But if it did, it would suffocate and die, which is why we swaddle babies to mimic the closeness they felt while in the womb so that they can have that experience while adjusting to a much obviously bigger womb. Well, starting to crawl, that's another transition to a bigger womb. Now the world is bigger. Getting out of diapers, going to preschool, going to school, dating in a relationship, going to different schools, high school, going off to college, launching, all of these, getting married, buying a home, switching jobs, getting promoted, hitting middle age. They're all moves from one womb to another. And I developed these choices, or kind of highlighted these choices that my daughter was going to face as she moved to this big womb of college in another state, 4 hours away from mom and dad. So eventually, I kind of thought seriously about this as a kind of college book for kids who are off for the first time. And then I started presenting at colleges with this book. Ended up giving it to her before I started presenting. I gave her kind of a handwritten copy of this thing and handed it to her as she turned around and walked towards her dorm. And my wife and I turned around and walked towards our car. It's a very surreal moment that I know a number of you have experienced or you will experience on both ends. So eventually wrote the book. She ended up writing the foreword to it. It ended up being a really cool little best-selling book called Choose Your Own Adulthood, and it's about the small choices that actually make the biggest difference. And we're going to go through some of those choices because I've been thinking about those again as my son's going off. And every time I think about it, I think, well, how well am I living making these choices? And the key part about these choices is it's not black and white, do this, don't do that. Because in the adult world, life's just not that clean. It's just not that clear. So how I framed it was, well, just do more of this and less of that, and you'll be amazed over time the big difference that that makes. And here's the first one. First one is for us all in all areas of life. But it is simply this: pursue more of what you want most and less of what you want right now. Pursue more of what you want most and less of what it is you want right now. One of the things I want most is a healthy, fit body, especially as I age, going into my 50s, mid 50s now. One of the things I want right now is a whole box of Krispy Kreme donuts or pizza. And I can do that. I'm a grown man. I've got money. I can do that, and I have. But just because I have the freedom to do that does not mean I am free from the consequences of doing that. And one of the most painful life lessons is that short-term decisions without consideration of long-term effects is one of the easiest ways to become poor, unhappy, and alone. So do the opposite. Think about what it is you want most. One of the exercises I do with my coaching clients is I lead them through something I call thoughtful wishing, where they go through making a list of anything and everything they can possibly think of that they may want right then and there. This is not going, they're not being held to this. They're not, nobody ever is going to see it. It's just whatever pops in your mind. You want a pizza? Write it down. You want a truck? Write it down. You want a romantic tryst with a cabana boy you had in Cabo? Write it down. Anything. You want to start an orphanage? You want to move and live into a foreign country? You want to go get a PhD? You want to get a divorce? Whatever pops in your head. And then we look at those and begin to say, okay, what are the things you really do want most? Because you'd keep doing that list long enough and the pizza and the truck stuff go away. What really comes up is I want to spend more time with my family, or I want to leave a legacy, or I want to do work that matters more than just dollars and cents. Those things come out. Well, here's the deal. Having that list of the things we want most helps us resist the urge to choose the things we want right now. Because if I'm constantly thinking about it, and this was a kid I met when doing this talk at a college one time. He had a picture of his what his degree would look like, what his diploma from that university would look like in his dorm room. And he had that up there and said, just to remind him, that's why I'm here, to get that. It doesn't mean don't ever go to parties, but it does mean, you know what? If I've got a choice of finishing a paper or getting studying for a 8 a.m. final or going to another party, I have something that can help me. It doesn't guarantee that I'll make the right decision, but it's something that can help me think, forecast, and that is the hallmark of an adult human. Our ability to access the neocortex part of our brain so that we can talk to the more emotional and reactive parts of our brain, say, hey, I know you want this right now, but I also know that what you're going to want right now, later, is stability, is financial security, is a healthy relationship. There's gonna be a now in the future where you're gonna want those things, and what you decide right this now will help determine whether or not you have that now. Pursue more what you want most, less of what you want right now. Here's another one: is produce more, consume less. We live in a world we have created that is entirely driven by consumption, more so than ever in human history. It is all about consumption, consumption of content more than anything now. And we've devised these amazing, technologically marvelous ways to constantly feed our brains with content in short bite-sized bits that give us little tiny, tiny hits of certain neurotransmitters that make us feel better until they make us feel worse. Why? Because we know, and it's very tied to the first choice that we talked about. We know that humans are actually happier longer when they are productive, when they're actually producing something of value. I remember when the iPad first came out and Steve Jobs announced it. It had no abilities to create anything. Didn't have GarageBand on it yet. It didn't have any sort of drawing mechanisms. It was purely an internet watching device, an internet reading device. It was a consumption device. And he actually said, we're not doing that for the iPad 2. We got to have things to enable, because that's what has always made Apple, certainly in his mind, unique, was it gives the ability to create, and we make it easy for people to create, to produce. Think about it in your life. When you produce something of value, it takes hard work, it takes dedication, it takes sacrifice, and all of those things actually feed our best selves, our souls, whatever you want to call it. It feeds the part of us that wants to sit back and reflect. You sit back and reflect. It's one thing to say, I'm really, really glad I consumed 2 hours of social media. Nobody says that. But I'm really glad that I took the time to write that piece of music, build that business plan, create that meal, write that paper, build that website, record that podcast, have that difficult but constructive conversation with the person on my team or my sibling or my child. Those we look back and reflect and feel good about because we produced something instead of just consuming something. One more, and then we're going to come back with some real doozies. Be more interested and less interesting. Be more interested and less interesting. This was one of the ones that I really stressed with my kids going into new social situations like college, where they're going to be in so many situations where they don't know anybody. Well, the temptation when you feel that insecure is to make yourself look as interesting as possible. And we all do it. We've all done it. We all will do it again. But you know what's actually more effective? Be incredibly interested in other people. Not in a stalking way, but in a, huh. So, well, tell me about that. Follow-up questions. So even if it's something as, what's your major? What do you do for a living? Follow it up. Well, what do you love about that? What do you find is the most challenging part for you? And let your curiosity drive you. Let that being interested. You don't have to reveal one thing about yourself. You can go through an entire networking meeting asking questions about other people, genuinely interested in them, and you can reveal hardly anything about yourself, and they will all say, "Man, that guy's a cool guy. She's really, she's really cool." Why? Because people love to talk about themselves, and they love it when people show interest in them. So be less interesting, be more interested. So when we come back, what in the world might I say by saying tolerate less, be more intolerant? Or that you need to risk more, or that you need to have lower expectations, or that you need to be less loyal. We will address some of those when we get back. You're watching The Leader's Pause with Hal Runkle, and we'll be back in just a bit. Leader's Pause. I'm your host, Hal Runkle. You can always find me at halrunkle.com. And who am I? I'm an executive coach, and I help leaders learn to find calm, learn to press their own pause button so they can be more thoughtful, think clearly, access the human parts of their brain so that they can make decisions with forecasting, that they can think through what might happen, whatever they do next. Those are the hallmarks of being an adult human, which is why those are that's so much of the emphasis that I had in my parenting when I was trying to help prepare my kids for life as an adult without me and their mom. And tomorrow is another situation facing that where my son is going off to live in a foreign country for a long while, and saying goodbye to him is sad, but I couldn't be more happy for him and proud of him and believe in him, and I think he's going to do fantastic. And I like giving him messages. And they're usually messages that I need to hear as well. And so that's what we're doing. And I actually wrote a lot of these in a book that I wrote, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago now. It's called Choose Your Own Adulthood. And it was a book I initially wrote with my daughter when she went off to college. But now it's become so much of the work that I do with my clients because the choices that we highlight in the book about adult choices, they never go away. And actually, the consequences actually become even more severe the older we get. So we talked some about some of the choices earlier in the first half of the show, and here are some other ones. And these are not do this and don't do that. These are do more of this and less of that, and you will be amazed at how your life will improve. Let's jump right in with some more. Like I teased earlier about less tolerant. Well, I know that reeks of everything anti-PC. Don't be, we need to be more tolerant of others. And I say that's wrong. We need to go beyond that. We don't just need to tolerate one another. We need to learn to appreciate one another. So the choice is appreciate more, tolerate less. You think about it. Tolerating somebody is a very low bar. It's a very low bar of, okay, I will tolerate your existence on this planet somewhere near to me, as opposed to I will humble myself, access my own curiosity so that I can learn to appreciate you. Now, this sounds like a foreign language in the world we live in now, because the last thing we want to do is appreciate our political opponents, especially in an election year. And yet, how much further along would we be as a society? Are we when we learn to try to actively appreciate one another? There's a great look at it, Google this, appreciative inquiry. It's a method of questioning that can begin to help people understand one another without critique, judgment, subjugation. It's fascinating how it works, and you love it when you receive it. When someone doesn't automatically judge, they just ask questions, and they don't even follow up with their own opinions about it, about to counter yours. They just want to appreciate what you have, how you got to this place, how you got to your positions. Just imagine what that's like if we're on a larger scale, but now narrow it, just bring it to you. What would it look like to appreciate the differences you have with your spouse? Appreciate the uniquenesses you have on your team. Appreciate that your kids are different from one another and different from you. Appreciating these, learning to value them, could actually get to the place where you learn to learn from them. I think one of the coolest things is raising your young adults in launching them into a world where you actually want to learn from them, and how much they're amazed when you say, "Well, you know what? You're in this world. I'm not in that world. Tell me. Tell me about it. Tell me what you learned." My daughter's a marketing major, asking. She knows more about marketing than I do. So I like that, and I would extend it to your company, extend it to whatever leadership role you're in. Appreciate more, tolerate less. Another one, risk more, regret less. You've probably heard this. There's been books written about it, but talking to very, very old people on their deathbeds, what are their regrets? Almost to a person, almost 100% of the time, it is not regretting something they did. It's regretting something they didn't do because they were scared, because they were terrified of taking a risk. It's the hardest risk to evaluate is the risk of doing nothing. And so we elevate the risk of doing nothing because we can see the risks of investing in this thing or starting this thing or initiating this conversation or asking this person out or asking for a raise or moving, changing relationships, changing your stance on something. Imagine changing your political opinions on something because you got more educated on something. Taking a risk is inevitable because there's always a risk of not taking a risk. So the most successful people in life are the ones who are constantly striving to take good calculated risks because they realize if they're not, then they're passively taking uncalculated risks and then wondering what happened. I shouldn't say that because that's me as well, a lot of times. But you know what? The more you risk, the less you regret, especially as you get older. Here's another one. Be and this one's a little tough, but be more loyal to your principles and be less loyal to people. This one is always, whenever I've spoken on this, it rankles some people. As I say actively, loyalty is totally overrated. You think about it, loyalty as a governance mechanism is incredibly toxic. Who governs with loyalty? The mafia. Loyal to the family, even as you violate whatever ethic you may have had. You be loyal to the family, no matter what. Even if you end up in jail for it, at least you're loyal. These are how weak leaders govern. Loyalty. I've counseled, coached in organizations where you will have people, they say the founder builds a business and he has his people and then he sells the company, but he's still around and he's feeling the lack of influence because he has sold the company and now other people are leading it. And so what he'll do is he'll go to those people who are his people and he'll give them money. I've seen this happen. He'll give them bonuses, keep him relevant because he's buying loyalty. I told my daughter, you don't want to be loyal to your roommate. Your roommate says, hey, lie for me in college. Tell the professor I'm sick when the reality is you're hungover for the third week in a row. What's loyalty? Be loyal to your principles that say, no, I'm not going to lie for you. Why? Because I care for you. And me lying for you is only enabling you to continue this really self-destructive behavior. So I'm not going to be loyal to you in the way you think. I'm going to be loyal to my own principles that actually are better for you. Now, you may not see it that way, and that's fine, but I'm being loyal to my principles. The book ended up with 16 of these choices because there's 16 weeks in a college semester. And then the book's really short. It's really small. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Choose Your Own Adulthood. But the last choice was not one of those more or less choices. The last choice was an actual do this, don't do that, an either or. And it's this. You can be real or you can be perfect. You can't be both. That's your choice. You can be real and recognize that imperfection is built into the recipe. It's part of the genius of being human is our imperfection. I'm always amused when someone gets really defensive when they have a mistake pointed out and say, look, I'm not perfect. Here's the best response ever when somebody says that to you. Just say, nobody was confused. Nobody was, they thought you were perfect. Why do you think you're supposed to be? Why do you think you're even close? You are light years away from being perfect, as am I. So let's stop trying to do that. Let's stop trying to think we are or we think that we have to be. How about let's be as real as possible, and recognize that that reality means, you know what, I'm full of imperfection and there's gifts. Brene Brown's one of her first books. I think maybe her first book was The Gifts of Imperfection. And it's fantastic. It's just recognizing this is what makes beauty is the flaws. One of my favorite, my son's a model, and so he showed me a campaign one time. I can't remember who it was. I think it was like Diesel or some clothing company, but it had all the models were had obvious birth defects, and the beautiful tagline underneath was "Go with the flaw." I loved that. Own it. Own this. Own your tendency to make decisions of pursuing what you want right now instead of what you want most, like we talked about at the beginning. Own the fact that it's much easier to consume than it is to produce. Here's the ironic thing or the paradoxical thing. Once you own that reality, then it makes it a lot easier for you to pursue something else. Start with being real. Choices are hard. Adulthood is hard. And there's no excuse from it. You can't be excused. My son is going off. He's going to make great choices. He's going to make really, really some poor ones. He's going to be great no matter what. As are you. So thank you for being with me. The Leader's Pause. See you in a couple of weeks. Again, halrunkle.com, and we'll check you next time.
You have been listening to The Leader's Pause with Hal Runkle, the show that helps leaders like you find calm, get clear, and level up. Tune in every first and third Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern on Transformation Talk Radio to access your greatest superpower, the ability to pause, think, and decide for yourself. Book a conversation with Hal today. Visit halrunkle.com.